Yes, we're live now, Chair.
Thank you, Jan. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to January's Accounts and Audit Committee. Just before we start, I'll just do a quick roll call just to make sure that everybody can hear me and we're all here. Have we got Councillor Amma?
No.
Councillor Carter?
Here.
Councillor Iqbal?
Yeah, here.
I'm here. Councillor Newman?
Here.
David Rothwell?
Yeah.
David Watley?
I've not had apologies from David Watley, but we're going to send him the invitation again because I can't see him down the list of participants as being invited. So.
Okay. And I see we've got Ruth and we've got Sophia.
Good evening.
Dean's here as well. Craig. Have we got Marie as well?
No, Marie's not here. I'll cover that one.
You'll cover that one, Dean. Oh, okay. So just before we make a start, if we could put our mics on mute unless you're speaking, and that will help the sound, hopefully. Also, members, when we get to the reports and the voting, I don't intend to go around every single councillor for a vote. If anybody has got an issue and wants to vote against any of the reports, if you just put your hand up or speak, we'll go through that particular vote on that particular item. Okay, I just see David has come in. Catherine, is there any apologies from Councillor Amar, or are you expecting him to join?
He did say he was coming. I'm not sure why he's not logged on yet. I'll send him a text.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we'll get onto the agenda items. Declaration of interest, councillors. Anybody? Not all okay with that. Okay, item 2 this evening is we've got to appoint a vice chairman for the committee. Have we got any nominees?
Can I move Colin Carter?
Okay, have we got a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. So, everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so Councillor Carter, vice chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, item 3, minutes. Somebody to move and second the minutes.
Move him, Chair.
And Councillor Carter second them. Thank you, councillors. So item 4, the external audit update.
Sorry, Chairman. Can I just sorry, it's not on the agenda, but in the minutes of the meeting was minute 45 on internal audit outsourcing. Just to inform the committee that the Policy and Resources Committee did resolve to identify a preferred bidder for the provision of internal audit, and that is the Mersey Internal Audit Agency. So we've written out to them today to confirm that. It's in the public domain, that's why I'm saying it in front of Ruth here, because it was reported last week to the committee. But there is a 10-day standstill period that we're required to observe. So whilst we can't confirm that, that's the resolution of the Policy and Resources Committee.
Yep, that's fine. Thank you for that, Dean. So item 4, external audit update.
Hi, can I take that, Chair?
Of course.
We don't have a report for that. Due to the extended deadlines, we are beginning to start the 2021 audit, so progress will start on that next week. Just to update on 1920, the last piece of work we had was the certification of the housing benefits claim, and I'm pleased to say that was certified today and sent off to DWP well in advance of the deadline for the end of the month. Happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Sophia. Councillors, any questions? Okay with that update, thank you very much. Yeah, item 5 is the annual audit letter.
Thank you. That's me again. just a quick summary. This is sort of the condensed version of the audit findings report you had at the last audit committee. It's sort of the public facing document that you have to display on your website. So I don't propose to go on to it. The only thing I'd like to mention is that the additional fees are disclosed on Appendix A, page 15 of the report. We have got the COVID fees there, and you might be able to put them onto your government return and be able to claim some of them back, I believe. But happy to take any questions on the report.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, have you got any questions?
I think Chair claiming back has brought a smile to Dean's face. So
Yeah, I saw Craig writing it down. That's brilliant.
I know. Yeah, I think, Chair, we looked at this in detail last month, as Sophia says. So this is the front-facing bit. So I'm happy to move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Iqbal. Okay. All councillors happy with that report as it's set out? Item number 6 is the internal audit plan progress report.
Brilliant, thank you, Chair. So yeah, please find enclosed the latest progress report from MIAA, just highlighting the work that's either in progress or has been delivered, any key messages that we feel are pertinent to the committee, following outputs, and just the working arrangements that are ongoing at the moment. Just going through the report, section 2, the head of internal audit opinion delivery. So it is around this time of the year that we have to start thinking about your head of internal audit opinion. So we're looking at the assignments that are being delivered and the assurances provided. We also undertake your assessment of the governance and risk management arrangements. And I think everybody's pretty aware that this year has proved to be challenging for all public sector organisations. So the normal strategy of being out on site and delivering audits face to face has obviously changed. Pleased to report, though, that your internal audit plan is progressing really well. And at this point in time, I don't expect there to be any problems in delivering that in full. And I think this is in part thanks to the receptiveness of the people being audited and those teams that are being audited. And we need to say a big thank you to all those involved, I think, and give them some praise. Obviously, our audit teams have had to adapt as well in the way we do our audit. So the forthcoming audits of the key financial systems will obviously be undertaken remotely. So the way in which we gather that evidence will change this year, and technology being a key role in that. Section 3, I think it's important to note that on page 2, the auditors have been audited, which is quite a unique experience, really. It's a case of practicing what we preach, and it's an external assessment that's undertaken every 5 years. CIPFA have undertaken that assessment, so we're pleased to report that we are fully compliant with the public sector internal audit standards. And I've shared a report in full with the Chair and Dean earlier on today. Section 4 on page 3 is the exec summary, I guess, highlighting progress, agreed assurance opinions and progress against the follow-ups. Pleased to report some positive assurance opinions that we've assigned on Treasury management and the client function reviews. I wasn't obviously going to talk through those in detail, but if there are ever any questions, please ask. We've also completed and finalised the remainder of the 1920 reports, and there are 2 further reports that are at discussion draft stage. Just looking at progress against the plan, the key and mandated, well, no, not mandated, sorry, core system reviews that are remaining are the key financials. So we'll be picking up some conversations with Craig in the next day or so to book those in and schedule them ready for your head of audit opinion later in May. On page 5 is a progress against the follow-up. So I think it's bad timing, actually. I have amended the table, and it is an ongoing tracker. You think you used to call it an IARD, so I'm assuming that's internal audit recommendations I don't know what the D was, but we have our own tracker, so we've got that position statement. I know there was some feedback from David at the last committee about the presentation. It was more of a position statement. So as you can see, there at the time of writing the report, there were quite a few recommendations partially implemented. So we have contacted the auditees and it was just evidence gathering. Pleased to report, though, that a lot of them are implemented or are partially implemented, and there might be some delays due to COVID. I know, for example, on there's the health and safety recommendations are superseded, but we've undertaken that as part of the ongoing annual review. For the recommendations, what I was going to propose is, unless there are any high risk recommendations raised throughout the year, if it's an annual review, so things like the key financials or the council tax reviews, we will just undertake them as part of the annual audit. But if there are any high risk recommendations in there, that we obviously will pick those up sooner. I'm just thinking, going back actually to page 3, we have in there some events, and it's just, if you ever feel as though there's any events, these are free events that we put on, and we have various speakers. If there's anything that you ever want to attend, just let me know, and we'll send through the links. Everything's remotely now, so you don't have to drive anywhere. So yeah, and it's just also to mention that I'm now a member of the Lancashire Head of Audit group, and I don't know how I've got into this position, but managing to host the event on behalf of Pendle for the next one in March. If there are any topics that you'd like me to discuss, obviously I can take that back to the group, but if there are any issues arising or key topics of discussion, I'll bring that back to the committee, or obviously have the discussions with Dean as well. Are there any questions before I want to have a quick discussion about a proposal on the assurance opinion definitions going forward? Is there any queries on the detail?
Just a question from me before we open that up.
Yeah.
You partly answered it in terms of page 5, in terms of the partially implemented.
Mm-hmm.
I think you said that quite a few of them have gone from partially implemented to probably implemented.
Yeah.
Are those date driven in terms of when you would expect them to move from partially implemented to implemented?
Yeah, so at the time of picking up the previous IARD, all of them were ready for implementation. So it is a case of following up everything that's been previously reported. If there are any recommendations that are still partially implemented, I'll be presenting that back to the committee with a revised timescale, but also letting you know of those recommendations, which ones are considered high risk.
Okay.
And the explanations for that. What I've traditionally done is actually, maybe on a biannual basis, is report a follow-up position in full to the, in this case, it'll probably be to Dean. So it will highlight all that detail with just the summary table presented to yourselves, so everybody's aware of the position.
Thank you, Ray. Yeah, David, yeah, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Ruth, I noted with interest, and it's great to see on page 3 with regard to the current year reviews, that the reports that have been finalised, I think without exception, all indicate substantial overall assurance. Can we take it from that within those individual pieces of work, there haven't been any high priority findings or issues identified?
Yes, so it actually leads me very, very nicely on to my next discussion about your assurance opinions. But no, there are no high risk recommendations in there. They'll either be considered medium or less.
Thank you.
So no. So it leads me on to a discussion and a proposal around your assurance opinions and the definitions. So in Appendix C, for all the 2019-20 audits that, in fact, for the Treasury Management as well, actually, and the client function, we have used the definitions as provided to yourselves. And as you can see, they are mapped across to our assurance opinions. Now, a couple of years ago, our ratings were very similar. We had a full, substantial, limited and none. However, we did find that for some reviews, the applications of controls could appear inconsistent. So the overall achievement of the system was okay, but there may well have been a high risk recommendation, which is a bit like what David was alluding to before, and we wanted to make sure there was that distinction. I think for discussion today and maybe permission today, or maybe we take it to the next committee after you've thought about it, is that we're going forward now that we are the internal audit provider and it's in its entirety, that we start using our descriptions and narrative to support the assurance opinions. But obviously that's for approval.
Okay.
Members, just perhaps to help of that, I think it does perhaps help provide a bit of granularity to some of the recommendations. So if you're wanting my advice on this, I think you needn't be that concerned about it, and it's a good move in the right direction.
I'm trying to think of an example. It may well be that we have our own matrix for risk ratings, and as you can see, we have a substantial and a moderate assurance, which actually maps across to your substantial. The way our matrix works is that if there are any high risk recommendations, if there's one high risk recommendation in there, we have to consider a moderate assurance report. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the achievement of the whole system is not there. But it highlights to you that there may well be there is a high risk recommendation in that report.
Thank you. Great. Yeah, David, come in. David Watley.
Sorry,
David.
Yeah.
David had his hand up first.
That's all right. If I can set my mute button off, I'll be able to speak. Ruth, yeah, I mean, that's not unusual having 5 ratings as opposed to 4, although it does give you the opportunity to sit on the fence and
sit on the fence.
But anyway, I'll pass that by. How does that then relate to the annual opinion, and do those ratings apply to the annual opinion as well as assignment reports? And are your ratings of your recommendations changing in any way, or are they just going to be the same as was before?
The overall assurance opinions do map through to the head of audit opinion.
Yep.
So far, they are easy to map across to yours. So at the moment for the 2021 audits, we haven't issued any moderate opinions. So that would be easy across to map across. The risk ratings, they are again in the definitions are slightly different. The way that we've done it though is for all 1920 we have assigned we haven't had any criticals, but high, medium or low risks. And they can map again easily across to your priority 1, 2 and 3. I think that might be where a little bit of confusion came about the last follow-up table that I presented to the last committee.
Okay. No, that's fine. No, thanks. I'd thought of something else, but it's gone in my head. I'll come back later. Don't worry. Thanks.
Thanks, David. David, you want to come in?
I've taken my hand down in light of that last question and answer. That was my question.
Oh, yeah, I've thought of it now. Can I come back in, Chair?
Go on then.
Okay. I mean, I don't know whether we're planning on doing this. Does that make life more interesting or challenging in terms of looking at assurance levels over, let's say we pick the last 3 years? Would it make it more complicated, less complicated, or does it really matter?
Is that for me?
Well, I can ask Dean if he likes, but I don't know. That's fine.
I don't think there will be any impact on previous years. It is based on that year as that sole year, I guess.
Yeah, so I suppose it was just the question if we were saying are things improving, and although I think I'm probably being a bit pernickety, given that the number of substantials and moderates is probably mostly what Pendle gets anyway, and very few limited or nons in your terminology. So, but if we were saying, how's it improved over time, would it make life a little bit more difficult with comparing apples and pears in terms of your ratings versus the previous auditors?
I guess that's where the follow-ups might come in, to give us assurance that any previous recommendations are being followed up. And that obviously contributes to our head of audit opinion. That's a key element. So I guess that's where I'd include that thought process for our opinion.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, have you got any feedback, any questions on what Ruth is proposing there to move across to the MIA definitions? I would concur with Dean. I think it does make sense now that MIA will be the auditors to follow their process. All happy with that then? Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ruth. Thank you very much. Item number 7, Treasury Management Report. Craig?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I'll take this. Thank you. So just a summary of the Treasury Management Q3 report is just a high-level summary of Treasury activity from the period April 20 to December 20. Just the key highlights really are probably alluding to the change in Treasury Management strategy and the borrowing strategy in particular presented to Policy and Resources Committee, paragraph 11, just a change on the stance of no borrowing from a more strategic approach to borrowing previously, and that change being approved. In summary, there are still, obviously in light of the COVID situation, the flow of grant money is coming through the council, so we are holding balances of cash and there is a lag before we're able to passport that, for example, to businesses. So we are holding healthy sums for deposit, albeit the rates are relatively low or comparatively low. So that will have an impact on the return on the budget that was previously issued to Policy and Resources Committee last week. So that means it's coming down from around about 100k to 40,000 currently, but the overriding factor remains to preserve the capital, not the return or the yield on that. But it's just interesting to note that whilst we're holding cash, the return is less than we originally forecast. And in summary, given where we are in the year, there'll be a review of the strategy for next year, and that'll be presented to Council in March. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Craig. David, you've got your hand up. Come in. David, is that an old hand or a new hand?
That's an old hand.
Okay. Councillors, any questions on the management? Okay. Well, I take it we're all good with that, then. Thank you. Item number 8, corporate governance. Dean, you said you were going to cover this one.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So the report's really in 3 parts. The first part is the review of the local code of corporate governance, which is in essence a framework that's set up by SIP for Solace that we self-assess ourselves against. We've undertaken that self-assessment, and on page 2, 3 and 4 are the areas where we consider there needs to be further work. Not to suggest that there's any weaknesses there necessarily, it's just one of those things where we're challenging ourselves to make sure everything is as it should be. I won't go into those in any particular detail, but it's just to give you assurance that we look at our governance arrangements on a regular quarterly basis to make sure that they're up to scratch. Quite a bit of that then feeds into the annual governance statement that features in the council statement of accounts. We're required to include that as part of that document, and as you're probably aware, we then produce an action plan out of that review of the governance arrangements. And what you've got on part 2 of the report is the table showing those actions and the actions that have been taken since the statement of accounts was approved. So it's just again giving you assurance that those things that we identified as potential weaknesses in our governance arrangements, that we are taking appropriate action through the year, and will then be reviewed again when we produce the next governance statement relating to the current financial year. And then finally, on page 7 is a summary table showing the risks, the strategic risks identified for the council. This is not every risk of the council, but the kind of top 15 risks or thereabouts identified by the council. This isn't the full risk register, it's just identifying those risks that exist. There is a fuller, more comprehensive risk register, which I think we do bring to you on occasion, that tells you what the risk is, what actions are being taken to mitigate those risks, and what it may mean for the council. So that's what the report's about. Just in terms of the risks, what I would say is if there's anything that councillors don't recognise on there or think should be on there, it would be helpful to know that, and equally to our colleagues from other sectors as well. But we consider that these reflect the major strategic risks that the council faces and the ones that we need to be managing as appropriate. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Dean. Any questions for Dean? Yes, David?
Yep, that's a new hand, not an old one. Dean, on your action plan, let me just get the thing up. Action number 4 on page. Hold on, I'll come to it in a minute. Page 6. The one around the CFO and other vacancies in the finance team. Could you just explain a bit more about what you're doing on that? Not just the CFO, but obviously other vacancies you've got, which obviously are posing a challenge.
I would describe it as a challenge, yes. So we have a vacancy for the Chief Finance Officer, which is a statutory post. I'm currently covering that as a qualified accountant. And equally, Craig, who is on the meeting this evening, he's leaving to go to Rossendale Borough Council in the middle of February.
Should we boo?
This is his last meeting. Right, look, he's been successful getting another job. We ought to congratulate him for doing that. So that creates another vacancy that we have or will do, and we've a vacancy for technical accountant following the departure of another member of staff who went to work for the county council. So there are a few vacancies there. We currently have some interims in helping out, and as you're probably aware, you may not be aware, we are recruiting for the Chief Finance Officer role. We're recruiting for the Craig's replacement, and we're recruiting for the technical accountant as well. So in terms of the financial cycle, we're largely done the budget, which is kind of the job that's now. That's largely done. So subject to members playing ball in the next couple of weeks, we should have a budget set and a council tax set. The key focus for us looking ahead is the closure of accounts. And so I'll be speaking to Sophia and Julie, my equivalent district auditor, as it were, old money, just to talk about the arrangements that will be in place for that. So what we're trying to do at the moment is plan for that significant piece of work, which will be the closure of accounts, statement of accounts production, so that we've got everything in place in order to do that. Of course, life doesn't stop. There's still things to do like budget monitoring, and on top of that is the impact of COVID as well, and the millions and millions of returns we have to do for government, who seem anxious to know that we want to spend every penny they give us. So yeah, it's a bit of a tough time because we've had a bit of turnover that we wouldn't ordinarily have, but everything is in place as far as I'm concerned to ensure that we get through the period and get through it successfully.
Okay, Dean, just quick supplementary question. So how many vacancies out of a team of what size?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think there are 3 main vacancies out of a team of, no, sorry, because the CFO is a vacancy, obviously, but of the account as a team, I think there are 7 or 8, Craig? Yeah, so you're probably looking at 3 out of 8 in that team. And there is another person retiring as well, which 2 people retiring actually as well. So in essence, we could have a fresh new team by the end of this year. But trust me, I'm on it, and we'll get through. Even if I close the accounts myself.
Well, I was going to say, Dean, if you don't get them, you'll be doing it yourself.
Well, I've done it before, and I'll do it again.
He's going headhunting, is Dean, I think.
I'm going hare hunting at some point.
Dean, just one quick question from me. It's just on the disaster recovery, the physical arrangements. Obviously, the homeworking has hit that quite hard in terms of being able to do that. So clearly, homeworking isn't going to change anytime soon. What's your thoughts around being able to get progress on that with the homeworking? Because that's the impact right now, I guess, in terms of stopping you actually testing the physical arrangements on site.
Yeah, I mean, it's disaster recovery in 2 respects. One is IT disaster recovery. So in the event that we were to lose systems, to what extent can we then recover those systems? Now, what we did prior to COVID was we set up an arrangement at Fleet Street where there is now the facility to be able to recover systems. Now, what we haven't done is test that in a way that we'd like to do that. But all the facilities are there. We also have something called Veeam, which kind of copies all of the council's databases over to a separate site, so we don't lose data as well. And I think we're reasonably confident that if systems were to go down, we could then recover those systems as well. And latterly, from an IT perspective, we've been encouraged by cybersecurity people in government that we should hold a copy of all our data off the network in a third-party site as well. And we do that because in the event you get people hacking the system and doing ransomware, they kind of tie your systems up, and the advice is to hold your data away from the network itself. So we do that as well. In terms of disaster recovery in a personnel sense, I mean, home working to some extent has tested that. We've been through that process. We are there. So I'm confident that, well, we probably, to some extent, with some people, probably won't go back to office working either. So I think where we are now is most people are home working. They can come into the office if they want to do so, but we don't encourage that. I think if we look post-COVID, we'll probably end up with a hybrid of people who work from home and those that work in the office, and people switching between the two. And I think, in essence, we're getting to a point where you've talked about in the past, like agile working and flexible working. Well, to some extent, we're doing it, and it's been forced upon us. And it's probably a good thing as a consequence of that, because we probably wouldn't have gone as quickly had we not had COVID. So my view, and I suspect other people would agree, this kind of stuff is good to a point. It gets a bit difficult sometimes. We're getting teamed out because it's just constant meeting after meeting. But generally, for operational purposes, it's pretty good, and home working is pretty good, and it allows people to have a work-life balance, a better work-life balance, I think.
Thank you, Dean. Yeah, I think that's an old hand, is it? Yeah. Okay. That's the last item on the agenda. I think before
Chair, sorry, I put my hand up belatedly. Apologies. I just wanted to inquire of Dean with regard to the action plan and the risks. Just what was the latest position on the financial sustainability front, if you will, as we move forward into 21-22, given the going concern issues that have been identified and medium-term exhaustion of reserves, etc.
Yeah, so where we are at the moment is the likelihood is we will have a balanced budget for 21-22, but that will mean that most of our budget support reserve, which we were using to balance the budget, will be used. It won't all be used. COVID has clearly had an impact in the current financial year, even though we're forecasting an underspend this year of about 197,000. What we don't know is the continuing impact of COVID into the next financial year. So this year, the government has provided us with about £2 million worth of funding. For next year, all it has done is given us a 1-year funding settlement. So I couldn't tell the council with any confidence what funding we will receive from 22-23 onwards. And the government has for the last couple of years, been talking about doing something called the Fair Funding Review, which is looking at how local government is funded and how the distribution of money between councils is undertaken. It's also been looking at how business rates works as well, because the majority of funding for local government comes from business rates. The issue there is twofold. One is the distribution of funding between councils as part of a business rates debate. The other thing is the sustainability of business rates as a tax as well, because what we're seeing is that quite a number of businesses seeking reviews of the amounts of business rates they pay. And for example, I don't think it's news. Our biggest rateable property is Boundary Mill, and where they have a reduction in their rates, that has a big impact on us. And any business can, if it so wishes, choose to appeal against its rateable value in the same way the college could do. They can do that. And any reduction in that rateable value leads to a reduction in the funding the council gets. And you can appreciate with COVID, and coming back to the point about people working from home, I suspect there's going to be a lot of office blocks that are going to be empty post-COVID, And there's going to be a lot of businesses going to say, I'd like a review of me business rates, please, and that will go downwards. So I think, and then you've got the things like Amazon doing online and all that stuff, and making, you know, the kind of red brick retail outlets a thing of the past. And if that starts happening in a big way, then you're going to see a lot of value in business rates plummet. And if local government is funded by business rates, then the funding available for local government will go down with it. So government is looking at the sustainability of business rates as a way of funding local government, and whether there's a different way of doing it. And that's been brought on, I think, more so now with COVID than it was in the past. So I couldn't really tell you what funding we're going to get post 21-22. That will be subject to the comprehensive spend review in October, November next year, or this year. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Councillor Newman, you've put your hand up.
Yes, Chair. Could I just ask, the talk of working from home, and then the talk of the business rates being reintroduced at some time, will the people working from home be part of that scheme, and will they have to pay business rates because they're working from home?
Through you, Chairman, no, they're not running a business from the home, they're just working from home. So, no, it's unlikely.
Thank you. Just to bring tonight to a close, I think place on record the committee's thanks to Sophia and Ruth for the sterling work in difficult times remotely in getting the reports to committee. So I'd like to thank you for your efforts on that. I suppose wish Craig all the best in his new role, and thanks, Craig, for your input into the committee, and also obviously the officers as well. And if Dean and the team could get that around, the work that the officers have done in supporting Sophia and Ruth as well, and everybody else through these difficult times, I think is sterling work, and it has to be congratulated, because they are challenging times and they are difficult, and you know, everybody is making a big effort. So just to put on record our thanks and appreciation for all that good work. And that is it, everybody. So everybody have a good evening, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening.
Yes.
Good evening.